Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Vicki.
And thank you to all our speakers. If this is your first, most intriguing that you're joining us with, just to fill you in a little bit how we like to end the year. Each year since 2021, we have ended as a check-in with a representative from the endowment. And as all the other topics from our TED Talks changed, there's a reason why we want to do this annual check on this same specific topic every year. And of course, it was not by design, but if you noticed, all the speakers that came up in one way or the other referenced the endowment. And that is, I think, something that you'll continue to hear more and more connections to as the fund continues to grow and have more disbursements. So the reason that we do this check-in from this publicly seeded fund is the $1 billion question. That's what we've called it before, because that's the amount that the endowment was started as when New Hanover Regional was sold. I want to rephrase it looking towards 2025, because under the rules of the endowment, they are able to disperse up to $64 million next year. And as you heard from the project Small and Large, that's not a small chunk of change that can come into the community. So how it's governed and how that process works and how it's decided which projects get those grant monies is of utmost interest to our readers, and I know everyone in this room. So for that, we have Dan in a hot seat today. And to start off with, if you have not had a chance to meet Dan Winslow, who started as the new president and CEO in October, we wanted to take the moment and start a conversation with Dan. You're not from Wilmington. You've moved here from Boston and have a background in the law field, brief stint as a judge, legislature, and most recently as director of the New England Legal Foundation. So to start us off, why did you want this job?
So thank you, Vicki. First of all, I want to thank all of you for coming today, and I want to thank the Greater Wilmington Business Journal for hosting us. All of the mentions of the endowment that you heard before me reflected the good work of our board and our staff who are here, so I just want to recognize them in the back. So thank you very much for all of your great work to get us to where we are. The endowment that we have here in Hanover County is a unique opportunity in the United States, and that's what attracted me to this job. My entire life has been trying to make the world a better place. Started as a Boy Scout, leave the campsite better than you found it, and service as a judge and a legislator and a lawyer and a bunch of other jobs, including janitor. But always trying to leave the world a better place, or the place a better place than I found it. The New Hanover Community Endowment's opportunity is something that people don't, I think, fully grasp. We have an endowment in this county that is the 75th largest philanthropy in the United States. The size of the endowment is bigger than the GDP of 15 nations, and the endowment is perpetual. What that means is we've reinvested that $1.25 billion it started, and we've grown it. In fact, the endowment has grown to almost $1.6 billion now, with the addition of additional monies released from the hospital sale, but also from investment returns. And we take that money and we reinvest it into the community. So between the growth of the endowment and the amounts of money that are awarded, we will be growing to about $100 million a year by 2028, thereabouts. And every 7 years, that $1.3 billion recycles into this community. So we didn't sell the hospital once, we sell it every 7 years, and it's going to be that way forever. This endowment has a per capita value that is, if not the highest, one of the highest in the country. And so the challenge, and the reason that I'm here, is how do we leverage that value? How do we make that value invested in this community in a way that gives us returns far greater than $1 billion, far greater than $100 million a year? How can we make a change to make New Hanover County a model for all counties, not just North Carolina, but across the country?
And last night, some of you may have attended the community meeting that the endowment held to give updates on the grant process and to allow folks to ask questions. So some of this may repeat some of the information, but you actually made several announcements to changes for next year about how people and organizations will be applying for grants in the future and how that's changed from maybe what they're doing now. Can you go into some of those details so that our audience knows too?
So the vision for the endowment is what I call philanthropy plus. We're going to do conventional philanthropy, to be sure, which is people with good ideas come to us and they apply for money and we give them money if it advances the 4 pillars that we're advancing, which is education, community development, health and social equity, and public safety. Those are the 4 pillars of our strategic plan, aligned with the county's strategic plan. But the plus part is this. there is not a problem that exists in New Hanover County that does not exist somewhere else in this country. And maybe that problem has been solved somewhere else in the country. It's certainly been studied somewhere else in the country. And so the plus part of our work is to harness the power of these ideas, the best thinking in the country, to create studies that we can then share with the legislature up in Raleigh or in Washington, D.C., or with the thought leaders here, or the policymakers at the county level, to say, what is the solution to problem X, whatever X is? And take the very best minds from universities, from think tanks, from corporations, from just smart people from all over the country and say, what is the solution to problem X, our problem that we have here, but other folks have it too. And then we have that study back, the power of ideas, far greater, by the way, than $100 million a year, the power of an idea, to be able to then take that idea and not just be reactive as a philanthropy, but to be proactive, to be a catalyst to say, we're going to take that study, that solution, and we're going to issue an RFP. And we're going to reach out to the nonprofit community, to the government community to say, hey, here's an idea, here's a solution to this problem. What do you propose to implement that here in New Hanover County? And in that way, we can turn this county into a social innovation laboratory to field test really some of the best thinking in the country so that our county becomes that model. Now, the way we're going to do that is what we introduced last night at the public meeting, which is what we call the Endowment Grants Rainbow. And if you think of a rainbow, well, this will be on our website, which is theendowment.org. If you think of a rainbow as different bands of colors, we'll have at the lower end of the rainbow what we call community grants. Those are $5,000 grants. And that's an Eagle Scout who needs $250 to buy trail markers to blaze a trail for their project. Or the garden club that wants to buy flowers to be able to beautify Main Street and have $3,000 worth of volunteer time donated to give that some nice look and to create sense of place, or the food entrepreneur from the culinary schools to be able to print labels to sell product at farmers markets. The next band above that is capacity grants, which is where we'll fund that scholarship that I talked about, but also to fund what I've called buckets. We can't give money to individuals, to grassroots groups that are not nonprofits, or to emerging nonprofits that are less than 2 years old. We have to do that through other fiscal sponsors who will do that. That's the Arts Council, the United Way, the Urban League, other groups that are in the community that can then in turn turn around and donate that money at a micro level or to help emerging nonprofits. The next level beyond that is what I call project grants. That's one and done. It's a building, an event, a thing that's just a one-time proposal. You come in, show how it's aligned to the pillars, what it's going to cost. That's the grant. You're done. Go do it. The next band beyond that is what I call operations grants. We have almost 2,000 nonprofits here in New Hanover County. About 150 of those nonprofits are established, well-run, well-managed, and aligned with our pillars. And what we're going to look to do is to simply invest in what they do so they can do more of it. Why reinvent the wheel? We've got an established, existing nonprofit ecosystem here. Let's make it bigger, better, bolder. And to do it, unlike a project grant where it's one and done, to say, no. On an operations grant, that's our commitment that you can count on. As long as you do your job, nonprofits, and raise money on Giving Tuesday and every day that you have to raise money, as long as you don't run a deficit, because we don't want to fund a deficit, we want to fund more, to do more, bigger, and bolder so you can hire staff and build out projects and programs. The next band above operations grants is strategic grants. Those are big ideas, 3 to 5 years to stand up. You can't just do it in 1 year. Maybe it's a bridge to other funding. And then the last band of the rainbow is what I call social impact investing. That's way bigger than us. We'll be able to do about $100 million a year, but we're talking about ideas that are $250 million, $500 million a year, the big ideas. We can't do that. But what we do have is a $10 or $20 million rock we can push down a hill and then pick up the momentum of other philanthropies, other funders, corporate funders, high net worth individuals. And then I get to call Senator Lee and say, look, we've got $75 million lined up over here. Can you get us another $200 million out of Raleigh? Now, I want to tell you, I used to be a legislator in Massachusetts, and the easiest way to get $200 million out of a legislature is to say, well, you don't want to give up the $75 million of free money you got lined up. And we can do that, to think really big. So that's the way we're going to implement the plus part of the philanthropy plus vision.
Let me ask you a little bit for a moment about that, the bigger idea level, and even the RFP idea level, because that's a change in philosophy. As the endowment ramped up the first couple of years, it was people applied for grants, whether project or whether a multi-collaborative one like the health talent one we discussed, or that was mentioned earlier. But what you were describing, it sounded like with an RFP, is that you all as an organization will come up with the issues, the research for the solutions, put it out to the community and see who responds to that specific request. So my question with those levels of granting, how do you decide what's the next big issue of these pillars to address, or these major issues that have been brought up in the community, from affordable housing to workforce development to public safety? These are all major things that, like you said, affect communities around the country. So what is the process for deciding what the next big part is to tackle?
So we don't have a monopoly, Vicki, on ideas. We look to the community to give us every idea that you saw here today was somebody's idea. We just write checks. And the thing is that we have enough capacity, particularly as we hit that private foundation status at the 5%, when we're looking at $100 million a year coming into this, and by the way, exclusively for the benefit of New Hanover County residents, because New Hanover County residents exclusively were on the hook for the tax for the asset that was sold. When we look at that, we are big enough that we can be broad as well as bold. And so we are going to continue to do the things that we've done to this point. It's not a change. We're just going to make sure that we also drive ideas. So we'll receive ideas, look at those ideas as we have already, and you see some amazing ideas that have already come to the fore. By the way, we've put over $120 million into this county in the last 4 years, 175 grant recipients so far. The board promised to do $19 million in affordable housing this year. They did $23 million for commitments in affordable housing over the next several years, $18 million of which was spent this year. So we're going to continue to do big things, but we also want to make sure that we drive the agenda. What is the solution to ending educational disparity based on where somebody's zip code is or where their neighborhood is? What is the solution to getting more jobs and job growth here? How do we make housing attainable, affordable, not just by people in poverty, but people that are in the workforce? How do we make things better so that everybody in Hanover County can say with pride that they're from here and people want to come here and grow here and bring their jobs here? So we're going to do both, conventional as well as the plus part of philanthropy.
And then I'm curious, where do you see your role and the board's role in terms of vetting all these proposals that I know that are coming in and will continue to come in? Bill Cameron, who is chair of the endowment board, described it as he thinks the board should be in place to be responsible for the governance procedures. The staff should be the ones that are going through and vetting through the checklist. I'm curious, what do you see in terms of responsibility between your role and staff's role and the board's, particularly when it comes to deciding which projects and which initiatives are funded?
So our board is a fiduciary duty, as all boards have, to oversee the entire operation. But the board of necessity was very operationally involved as a founding board. And so, as we put a management team in place, as we get management more on the field in the coming year and the years as we grow the operation, you're going to see a shift where management is more operationally focused and the board is more strategically and vision focused. The board ultimately will always have the final say in terms of what direction we're going. But you're going to see more, I think, approval processes pushed into the board, that is the staff level and to the management level, and away from the board, particularly the small things. We don't really need the board to oversee that Eagle Scouts proposal, for example, as long as they're aligned with the overall mission. But on those big ideas, we're absolutely going to look to the board to participate in this, not just the awarding, but also the strategizing and what's the direction we want to take. So we're in what's called the scale-up period of the endowment. We're pre-private foundation status through 2028. In 2028, that's when we hit that number that was called a tipping point, where we have to give away 5% of the endowment's value every year. But we're still in the scale-up process, so we're still actually, test driving a few things, and we're evolving things. And when we roll out our new website in January, we're actually going to be a lot more transparent in terms of processes. And when we have a process, we fine-tune. We're actually going to post it on the website. We want to have people be able to see what it is that we're doing in real time so that they can have confidence in knowing what do you have to do to have your idea or your project considered.
The Healthcare Talent Collaboration has been so far the single largest grant recipient, and that's a partnership of many large entities here, UNCW, CFCC, the school system, and the chamber. And that was for $22 million over several years to develop healthcare workers. What role does the endowment have then in terms of following up with not just that collaboration, but even smaller individual grant projects in terms of what they're doing and how they're, the accountability measure of how they're spending the funds?
So we don't measure success by dollars out. We measure success by impact back. And we're actually, next year, I've proposed to the board, and I think we've got some general support at this point. We're going to have 3 operating departments, if you will, within the endowment. We have operations and outreach, programs and grants, but then we're creating a new department. And that department is called Research and Impact. And the Research and Impact Department will have 3 units, Research and Innovation, which is harnessing and harvesting those ideas that I talked about earlier, that scholarship and curating that thinking. The second unit will be the Impact Department. We actually have metrics and we measure. Part of the metrics, and there's no sort of one size fits all, but when people apply for a grant, what does success look like? We need to understand, well, you've asked for $100,000, $1 million, whatever the number is, what does success look like? Because we need to understand that's what we're investing. We're not investing, the dollars are inconsequential in a sense. It's really what the outcomes are that matter to us and that we want to be able to share and report to the community. And we will be issuing a comprehensive impact report, not just the dollar report. We've done dollars so far, but we're going to start talking about impacts now that we've got enough of these projects in the pipeline. You've seen some of that here today. And then the last unit in this department will be the accountability department. And this, so the impact folks will work with our programs team and we'll make it all work. The accountability guys, we just want to make sure everybody's keeping everything honest. We're putting a lot of money into this community. We want to make sure there's accountability because we're stewards of the public trust, and we want to make sure the money is being spent wisely, fairly, and honestly.
And then what happens if it's not, or you feel like it hasn't lived up to what was applied for?
So there's 2 different paths there. If it's in the impact group, we'll always work with, we're investing in these awardees. We're investing in these nonprofits. We want them to succeed. And so, for example, if somebody promised A, B, C, and D, and they'd got A, B, and C done, we want to understand, okay, well, what was changed? How do we get to D? Or maybe we didn't need D after all. So we're not going to be rigid about that. The accountability folks, by contrast, if somebody doesn't do something or is dishonest, we're actually revising our grant agreement to have a bit more teeth to it so that we'll have greater, I think, legal opportunities if that happens. And the idea is this. You don't write a contract for the honest, hardworking, good faith efforts. You write a contract for the person that's going to try to cheat you. So we're going to have that contract in place for next year.
Capacity building has always been an issue since the endowment was proposed in terms of you infuse a community with this much money. And like you said, once it transitions and qualifies as a private foundation under IRS rules, you have to spend 5% of the market value. So that's where your 80 million, 100 million figure comes from. If you are required to put out $100 million a year in the county, that's always gone hand in hand with, is there the capacity to absorb that? So now that you're in this role now, what role do you think the organization has in terms of helping build out the capacity for these groups that are receiving it?
So we actually have organizations in the county that have the ability to assist nonprofits with management, best practices, data analytics, things like that. We also may build out that capacity as well so that we don't just give money, we also give in-kind training and the like. But we probably would prefer to do that through another awardee. So if you are in the business of coaching nonprofits about good management and best practices and governance, please give us a call. But that's something we'd like to fold into the mix. The idea is that we just don't want to keep rewarding success. Absolutely, we want to reward success and scale success. We also recognize that because of this unique opportunity, we're actually creating an ecosystem of emerging nonprofits. We want to make sure that they have a fair shot as well. We want to make sure that there's geographic proximity throughout the county to services that these nonprofits provide. By the way, nonprofits fill a critical gap between the private sector and the government sector, a gap that cannot go unfilled. And so we're incredibly lucky that we're actually seeing new, I don't want to call them baby nonprofits, but emerging nonprofits coming to the front of the line, really. And we're excited about that. somebody last night actually had asked a question about that because we were featuring, established nonprofits. It was like, they didn't start big, they started small. And we recognize that we have to start some small folks and grow them to their success as well.
And then when you look at a major overarching issue, like you mentioned affordable housing earlier, what do you think the role is in terms of the organizations that address that space or another major issue? Do you feel that they should come together collaboratively and approach the endowment, or do you feel like the endowment has a role in helping them coalesce around one of the bigger issues?
We're happy to encourage people to talk to each other. I think partnerships is a good idea. But we've put a lot of money, for example, into these affordable housing construction projects, but we're not done. It's going to be an ongoing issue. This county continues to grow, and we continue to have the need. So what's some new thinking about that? And we're exploring new thinking. Do you know that there's over 5,000 Airbnb units in New Hanover County between apartments and single-family homes, most of which are investment properties, many of which are corporate-owned? How about we try to figure out a way to convert some of those and create the economic incentives to create some of those into affordable units? Instead of building, affordable housing stock by the hundreds, why don't we build it by the thousands, simply by the flip of a switch? So there's things we have to explore. This is the power of ideas, and that's why we want to explore that more as well. We have the opportunity to think big here, so let's not lose this chance. Not to say to the exclusion of small progress, because small progress is still progress, but let's think big. And I'm really a big believer in the power of ideas.
Okay, and to wrap us up, this is your $64 million question for 2025. If you are a nonprofit in New Hanover County, here in our audience listening today, and are trying to best position themselves next year in the ongoing, we should point out it's a rolling grant process, unlike in the beginning when it was a deadline, and you're looking towards your year next year, how do they best position themselves to approach the endowment?
So we do have a rolling grants process, no deadlines. We meet you where you are on our website. We're going to be revising this process in the first quarter of next year to be more aligned with the rainbow that I've described. So we don't want to have like the Eagle Scout have to go through the same hoops that the strategic grant person has to go through. We want to try to tailor the grant process to reflect the value that you're seeking. But I think that the big focus for us next year is, and I think that the thing that we'll look to is, aside from the pillar alignment, that is, our mission, is what value do you think you can put in? The money's one thing, but what's the value? What's the output that you think that you can accomplish? What's success look like? And lead with success, because we're going to follow up with you. Success matters to us. What you bring back into the community matters to us. The dollars are a way to get there, but we do not measure success by dollars. We measure it by outcomes.
All right, thank you very much, Dan Winslow.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Nice to see you. Thank you all. Thanks, Rod.
Let's please have a round of applause for all of our speakers today.